Guys, this week we got a great question, especially with where rates are at right now. Can I assume somebody else's 2 to 4% mortgage? Stay tuned. I'm going to be honest, I don't get nervous about a lot of things, but when I do that intro, I've got to click a button so that little 7-second intro piece comes in. I get nervous that I'm not going to hit that button every single time. So one time you'll catch me and it'll be entertaining for you, but not today, folks. All right. So can you assume somebody's 2 to 4% loan? My gosh, wouldn't that be great? So the short answer is possibly, right? It depends on the loan. But I'm going to give you a lot of different facts here, but I'll tell you this. At the end of the day, if the situation makes sense, it's worth just asking questions, okay? So some loans are assumable, some loans are not assumable. VA loans are assumable. I bring that up specifically because a lot of people think you have to be a veteran to assume a VA loan. You do not, okay? And you get their rate, their terms, everything else. You get it all. You're literally taking over their loan. It's like you're buying that piece of paper and taking it over, okay? And for that, you get the home. However, this is the big challenge that a lot of people don't think about. Most homes that you're buying that have great rates, there weren't phenomenal rates a year ago, right? The phenomenal rates were like 4, 5, 6 years ago. Well, guess what happened over the last 4, 5, 6 years? Prices skyrocketed. So now you're buying a home for, let's say, $400,000. They probably bought that home for $250,000. Okay. And maybe they put 3% down. Let's just say they got a conventional loan or maybe an FHA loan. I'm rounding 3.5 to 3. So they put $7,500 down. So their mortgage was for $242,500. Let's just call it $242,000. Well, now they've paid it down every single year for 5 years. I don't know what that's going to be, but let's say they're paying down roughly $8,000 a year. $8,000 times 5 is $40,000. Man, they might owe $210,000 right now. So when you try to buy that home for $400,000 and they owe $210,000, the question becomes, where is that other $190,000 coming from? Now, if you've got the other $190,000 cash and you've got cash for closing costs and you've got cash for your down payment, you're good to go. You're good to go. But most people don't. Most people have $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. They do not have $190,000. Or if they do, that's not what they want to do with it. However, there are a lot of people who are selling their house for, let's say, $400,000. They're making $200,000 to $300,000, and they're going to go buy a house for $500,000. That might be a great candidate for that situation. Because yes, that $500,000 home is probably going to have a $350,000 maybe $1,000 loan on it, but you're going to have the cash from your sale to be able to purchase this home and put the cash down, possibly. Okay. So if you're in that situation, what you want to do is you want to reach out to the listing agent or have your buyer's agent reach out to the listing agent and say, hey, is your seller's loan assumable? And all they got to do is call in and ask their loan provider, hey, is our loan assumable? Talk to me about the process. And then you submit as a buyer. Let's assume that the seller says, hey, we'll do this. Buyer says, hey, we want to do this. All the numbers work, whatever. We owe roughly X amount. So you'd have to come up with roughly X amount in cash. Okay, we can roughly do that. Let's write this up. Now you're going to reach out as a buyer to that lender, just like you would any other lender, and you're going to apply for a loan, that specific loan. But you've got to apply because they don't want somebody with a really low credit score or a really bad financial situation taking over that debt that they have. Because right now they've already assessed the current seller and said, with that seller on paper, we're very comfortable loaning them that money. We feel like we got a good chance of getting our money back. They don't know the new buyer from Adam. That's an old saying. So they've got to check them out. They're going to check out their credit. They're going to check out their income, everything that they would normally check out when you're going for any other type of mortgage. And they're going to say yes or no. Now, typically, this process takes a little bit longer. So a normal loan can be closed in, 25 to 45 days. What I have seen is that this may take 3, 4, 5 months. And you don't know if it's going to take 3 or if it's going to take 5. So you need two parties that are both very understanding and very flexible on timing. Okay. I will typically say, although this is not 100% true, it depends on the market. If you're going to ask for something like this, you're typically going to have to pay higher in price to that seller. And you might think, why? Because of their perceived inconvenience of having to wait 3 to 5 months and not knowing if it's going to be 3 months or 5 months. And a lot of realtors have not gone through this process. So, and this isn't something a seller necessarily understands, but it might be a choppy process. Okay. So for that reason, I always say this too to people who are looking for seller financing. Well, they're asking 350. I'm willing to give them full price. Yeah, but you're also asking them to be the bank, not take their full 50 at closing, and instead they're getting a $2,500 payment with a 3-year balloon. That's not as attractive as someone who just comes and dumps a pile of cash on them in 30 days and they get all of their 350. It's just not as attractive. Does that mean you can never do it? No, it just means your odds of getting it done go down significantly. So typically speaking, if you want that home and you're coming in asking for seller financing, you might have to come in at 370, 380, 390, or give them a great interest rate or something to offset the negativity of the fact that they're not getting all the money. Always? No, not always. If it is a strong buyer's market, that might be the thing that allows them to get the price, the 350 they want, but they've got to give terms. Okay, it's a buyer's market, I'll do it. It's kind of the same with an assumable. Not to the same extent. I think it's less unattractive or more attractive to have somebody ask you for an assumable situation than seller financing situation. But just realize if they come back and say, hey, we'll do it for 10 grand, 20 grand over asking, but we're not going to do it for this. Just realize that is a understandable response. It's not something you got to say yes to, but it's an understandable response. So just be mentally prepared for that. But yes, you can do an assumable and you're going to get their terms. So if they've got a 3.125% interest rate, you're going to have a 3.125% interest rate. Okay. I have also heard of, and this makes complete sense. I've just never done this, or I've never had a client do it. You could get a second. So your first might be 3%. That's the one you're assuming. But maybe you don't have the full cash for the rest of it. So you try to get a second mortgage. You got to find someone who's willing to do a second mortgage, and second mortgages are typically going to be more expensive, right? Typically, and I'm making this up. I'm going to get a lender on here who's like, no, it's a little bit more, it's a little bit less, whatever. But typically, it's roughly 2% different. So if rates today are at 6.5, you go get a second mortgage. I'm guessing you're going to be around 8.5. Again, a lender might chime in and say I'm a little high, a little low, whatever. Let's see what Jade says here. Great info. I have a lot of buyers who ask about this and think it's a hole-in-one. Yeah, if you can get it done, it is phenomenal. It is a phenomenal deal. You just have to have the right financial setup to be able to do it, and you've got to have knowledgeable agents who can walk you through this process. But Jade, I agree with you 100%. If you can get it done, it's about as good a deal as you're going to get in today's market. Also, if you're a seller, remember this. What a marketing piece. If you're in a position to A, have an attractive mortgage that's assumable, call up and ask, and B, your timing allows, your flexibility as a seller allows for that kind of unknown but longer timeline to happen. You can market that. Hey, we've got an assumable loan. Here's the rate. Here's how much it is. You'd need to figure out the solution to the rest of the price, but we are willing to walk through this process with you. Wow. Now, if there's 4 homes on your street, all the same price, all kind of the same house, which one's the most attractive to most buyers? Yours. You're the most flexible, the most thoughtful. You got out of the box and came up with a solution that they didn't even know they had a problem, right? But you came up with a solution to a problem they didn't even know they had, which is pretty doggone cool. So this can help on both sides if, again, you're in the right situation. So guys, hopefully that's helpful. Again, it's called an assumable loan. There's a lot of loans that do this. So call up your lender, find out before you put your home on the market. If you're a buyer and you want to know, you can ask the listing agent. They can tell you if it's assumable or not, if those sellers are open to that or not. And now you've got yourself an absolute opportunity. Thanks for joining me. We're here every single Friday, usually at 11. I had an appointment. We had to move it to 11:30 this week. But otherwise, we're here at 11 o'clock where we answer your biggest questions. We'd love to see you next week. Guys, have a great weekend. Thank you.